Hey, it's Ryan Speltz, One Man's Journey creator and podcast host. Today, I'm pretty excited about somebody that I met pretty randomly. I think we found each other, met on through social media, and then a couple weeks ago, we were able to get together and break bread together and really talk through some things and invited him on. And Greg said, "Yes, absolutely." So I'm excited to have him on. This guy's done quite a few things in his life, inspiration to me in that regard, because I do a lot of things as well. And so it's nice to see somebody that's putting it together and making things work the way that he does. Greg is a husband, a father of five. He is coming up on his 33rd anniversary of sobriety, which is amazing. And for that 33rd year, he is starting Greater Ways coaching. He's an aspiring transformation coach with Greater Ways, and just a difference maker of all kinds. He's been the chairman of the board for Florida Recovery Schools now, which is a school for 14 to 19-year-olds with substance abuse disorders. And Greg, you're doing just fantastic things all around, obviously with the recovery thing, the recovery aspect, and the ability, you're doing scuba therapy. I mean, I can go on for days, but I'm going to let you kind of take over and tell your story. And like I said, you're an inspiration, so I appreciate you being on.
Oh my gosh. What, thank you, Ryan, for that. And what a gift second chances are, right? And that is always my intention and my desire, to make the most of the second chance that I've been given, because by all rights, and if you're, if you went by the law of averages, I shouldn't be here. I tried to commit suicide in my young age a couple of times. I was, diagnosed with a lot of different diagnoses over my lifetime. So if I just had those diagnoses, and I did what they told me to do, I probably wouldn't be here today. Because I would be, a lot of people take the medication route, and to take away that uncomfortability, because I was diagnosed with bipolar and schizophrenia in my young age. But the truth is that I was a hurt person. So if I back it up into my childhood, I had a lot of abuse stuff of many a form, and drugs and alcohol became more of my solution, my answer to deal with that pain. But anybody who's been down that route, that pain reliever often becomes the pain giver, the pain maker then. And it ended up, having me do a lot of things that I wouldn't have done, and involved in a lot of things that I wouldn't have done, and involved with a lot of people that I wouldn't have been involved in necessarily. But I became the kid in high school that you didn't want your kid around. I make the joke that I was the reason why they call it high school, because I was high all the time. and and if there was a category for a high school for least likely to survive, I think that I would have been in that category, because I was just so reckless. And the truth of the matter is I had a lot of secrets and shame and guilt that I just couldn't deal with. So my answer was drugs and alcohol, to kind of keep that at bay. And then whenever I would try to stop, the weird thing for me was, you see people stop and they get better. I was always worse. I was always worse, because I couldn't deal with all the noise in my mind, and the self-hatred would just come bubbling up. And so I had a full blown psychosis, nervous breakdown in the middle of my senior year, the old age of 17, and it seems like 9 lifetimes ago now, because I think that if you're in recovery or you're in transformation, they say that that we die to ourselves daily. But there were a lot of spiritual deaths that I had to die and to be reborn from. And back in the olden days, and I don't know how the system is now, is I made it to the county system, and they committed me 3 times and gave me a bunch of diagnoses, and I did the Thorazine shuffle. And if you weren't crazy, and I don't want to use a crazy word necessarily, if you weren't delusional before, whenever they over medicated me, I mean, I just couldn't be in a room anywhere where I thought everybody was talking about me. I was very paranoid, schizophrenic, and I couldn't be around the TV, because it was just a really hairy, scary, traumatic time for me. And the blessing of that was that the county facility, because I was locked up for a reason, because I was violent. I mean, and I was a danger to myself, and I was a danger to myself and others at the time. So I give no beef about that. But the county crisis unit sent me off to the state institution, and it was giant. Imagine. I have two 17-year-olds at home now. I can't even imagine my 17-year-olds being shifted off to that environment, and saying to them, "This is your future. This is your forever." And but the blessing of that was they took me off all the medication. They said you had a drug-induced psychosis, and I became like the model patient. And just to try to, so like, I got to get out of here. And but the insanity of it all is that I was using drugs and alcohol again when they were releasing me on the weekends, and I tried to go back and fit back, and that was like the one warning. They never sent me to meetings. They never gave you any way to any real coping skills. They said, don't drink or drug again, or you're going to end up right back here. And I'm like, yeah, right. I was already using last weekend. I got this covered. I'm going back out and getting on about my business, but I still had that underlying shame, underlying guilt, underlying self hatred that just haunted me through the next several years. And so I'm a multiple DUI recipient, all of that stuff. I ended up leaving Pennsylvania because I got more charges. But in that period, I met my ex-wife, and she ended up, because I needed a savior, and I thought she was going to be my savior, my way out of drugs and alcohol, because of course a man needs a good woman to not drink or drug for. And I ended up just dragging her through the ringer of what it's like to be connected to an alcoholic and addict, and a lot of painful stuff. But with all that being said, two more DUIs in Florida, losing my driver's license for 5 years. I ended up getting another suicide attempt. Just all the stuff that goes with that. I ended up with the blessing of being able to get sober at the ripe old age of 23. And who gets sober at 23? But that was the blessing of all that pain. And the wondrous thing about that, those early lessons is I was taught very much from the beginning is that, sobriety, like salvation, if you're a Christian, or even if you have joy, anything that you really is worth having, you have to give it away to keep it. And I learned that by being of service to others, right from the get-go, that I found a place in life. I found worth in life where I felt worthless as you could be. There was whale shit was higher than I felt most of my life. If I wasn't using drugs and alcohol, I just had like a shell I couldn't fit in. I didn't feel like I fit in pretty much anywhere I went. But coming into the recovery rooms, I was able to start to fit in and function and actually be of service to others. And I mean, I still hold to those tenets today, is that if you're not happy, go out and help somebody else find happiness. And you'll usually find it. You don't find it by sitting at home trying to manifest it by yourself. And that was the other thing that really struck me, is that I couldn't change myself by myself, because there are a lot of times that I swore that I would never use again. I would never do all that, never imbibe again. And because of all the stuff in my head, I would always end up using again. So I could stop, but I could never ever stay stopped, because I just couldn't handle life on life's terms. And along that course, I ended up having two daughters with my first wife. And the tragedy of that is when you get sober, a lot of times your angel that was trying to save you and who you are. And I mean, because you hear a lot of times now, you got to find your why to function in life. And I agree with that to some point. But if you don't know your I, if you don't know who you are, you can't really figure out what your why is. And that's the sad state of affairs. You can look all around and say, I got my why. But if you don't internally know who you are, if you don't know that, whatever your spiritual belief is, if you don't go in and you don't know your real why, your I, you can't really figure out the why. So, but we ended up getting divorced at 7 years, and that was another dark night of the soul for me. I pretty much was crushed, And that's whenever meditation actually came into my life. That's been like 25 years ago. I've been a regular meditator ever since then. I did a talk at Toastmasters last week with a bottle, and it had sand in it, and I would shake it up and down, and it had a frowny face on the front of it. I should send you pictures of it. But the thing of that being is that on the outside, I was really angry and ugly because I had all the pain, shame, guilt, resentment, remorse floating around in me, and that I could never get quiet, because for so many of us, we try to meditate, and quiet is really noisy.
Yeah.
and and so I thought that was a good example, is that if I can actually do that, and I do mantras, and my beginning was I would have done the serenity prayer over and over again, and that was my initiation into meditation, was saying the serenity prayer over and over again, and then I would have little pockets of peace that actually I could live inside my skin again. And I've been a very much an advocate of meditation ever since then. But on that journey, I was able to start a roofing company. I still have that roofing company now. I have a great partner that relieves a lot of that burden. That let me start the recovery high school. To be part of starting the recovery high school, we're having some struggles with that now. If anybody's looking to be an executive director for a recovery high school, we need you like now. So that's my ask of that. But I've just been able to be of service, in many, many ways. I just celebrated my 20th anniversary of being remarried. Who would have ever thought that train wreck of a person, me, can do the things that I've done, and have the gifts that I've done. You mentioned scuba therapy. I can't go past that. Me and my 17-year-old I've had grand adventures with all my kids, to tell you the truth, but the older ones are all out of the house now, so the twins are getting older now, and me and Ezekiel started scuba diving, and Alex is on the autism spectrum, and so we have issues that go along with that, but he's afraid of it. So lo and behold, we got a friend out of, like, a God-made coincidence, a GMC, that introduced us to scuba therapy, and I'm like, scuba therapy. And Ezekiel, like, is the dive master in his head already. He's teaching people to scuba dive all over the world, because he can remember everything. I can't remember anything. But so we start serving there, but that also gave the opportunity for Alex then to start to overcome his fear of scuba diving. So it's gave me and Ezekiel a place to serve. Scuba Gym serves veterans, people with strokes, people in, like, really, the founder's son had issues 20 years ago where he was paralyzed, and he's up and walking. He's a scuba instructor now, doing all kinds of incredible things. But David has run this scuba gym for a long time, 20 years or so now, and it really helps people on the spectrum, because you go underwater, and that sensory deprivation and the pressures help the young kids be able to concentrate and let go of the stuff. But then with disabled people, veterans and stuff, it can put them with the BCD. It can put you upright and put weights on your legs to keep your feet down, and they help you walking back and forth across the pool and do underwater activities where you wouldn't be able to get up and do them on your own. So that's been our newest great adventure. And then if you look on my walls, I've got every book. I've been self-help madman for a quarter of a century now, trying to figure out my issues and to overcome them. So that really makes me want to delve into the life coaching, and to be a transformational agent on more of on a bigger scale. So that's my wish for the rest of my life, is to help people overcome their not enoughness, their, whatever their struggles are that are keeping them from, I call them their God dams a lot of times, from being the person that God wants them to be, to break those dams, and to realize the treasure that you are and that you're meant to be. Because a lot of times, and I don't know how you feel about it, a lot of times it's not about learning something else. It's about getting the walls that keep you from being the best person that you can be. And
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. It's not everyone's looking for the next shiny object to get better and get more business, or become a better person, or like, what do I have to do? And it's the hardest part for people to recognize is do less, like
Right, and
subtract.
I totally that's why I really connected with you, because it's not about doing more, it's not about the great activity. It's about if you connect with God, and then you open up your arms, kind of like Christ on the cross, if you will, then say, I'm here to love the hell out of you." It really, people will come.
Yeah, it changes quite a bit, and I've even seen, so if you say that, that's the logo for One Man's
Right,
Journey, right?
right, yeah,
So that's the concept of the whole thing, right? Is that's to me when I designed the logo, that was part of it. It was like, okay, I'm opening my arms, and
right.
if
I'm no
I'm
longer like this, right? And
right, yeah, like
wondering why
I'm not
nobody
blocking
approaches.
it. A lot of people feel those blocks, especially men in our environment right now. We're kind of caught in that weird in between, right? Like the generation, and probably your generation, it has been very hard nosed and got to do
John
this. And
Wayne-ish, yeah, the
yeah, like
John
this
Wayne,
this
yeah, right, sure,
badass guy that shows up, and you have to be perfect and you can't
right.
show emotion. And we're coming into this wave, a couple generations later now, where
I was
that's
early.
yeah, like that's the whole idea is like, okay, we understand, and I would argue it's gross consciousness, right? Like it's global consciousness waking up,
Right,
and that intuition of understanding that other people are experiencing the same things, and just allowing ourselves to feel. And so, like you, that's what I've tasked myself with, which is the entire concept of One Man's Journey is like, let's open this up to understand that, like, you're gonna struggle. You're gonna have these things. You're gonna have these walls. You're gonna have things that are just gonna come up and punch you right in the face. And it's all about what happens after that. You don't have to be this perfect person that doesn't have feelings or emotions. Like, feel it. And the one thing that I've recognized through the course of recovery, and I actually talked about this on another podcast I did yesterday, it's once you get into that, it's a skill. It's a learned skill. And so, like, if you're looking to do more of something, like, just start feeling things, and like just like let it process through you. Because now when things come up, I'm able to go, okay, I've been down there, right? So I can, if you want to come with me, I'll grab it, like whatever I need to feel, I'll bring it
right,
down with me.
right, and we'll
And if
face
it
the ugliness.
survives,
We'll
it's a
face
real
the ugliness
emotion.
together, yeah.
Like, you can bring it down, and then if it comes back up with you, like, okay, it's a real emotion. There's so many things that, like, once you take it past your head, you're like, that doesn't fucking matter.
Right, right,
Like, it just
it
doesn't.
doesn't, right. It was a non-issue, yeah, it was a non-issue, how long will you let that boogeyman haunt you?
Yeah.
Because if the kingdom is within you, what are you storing in there?
Well,
It's like a
even
freaking
just,
haunted house, right?
yeah, and just like experiences in life that we cut ourselves off from because of these beliefs that have been created by somebody that's not even, they're not even our beliefs. They were
Right,
beliefs
because
created by somebody
that
else.
was one of my things too, is, who were you before they told you the story that you tell yourself, right?
Yeah, I mean, you come out as a baby and they put glasses on you, and you
Right,
have to find a way to take the glasses off.
yeah,
And that's the journey of life, is being able to get to that point. And so many people don't experience that because they don't even know they have the glasses on.
right, and so
And
do you have a coach right now, Ryan?
yeah, so
Nice, nice,
I've got a couple different coaches, and
yeah,
one of them's business, one of them's impact
mm,
coaching, so it's
mm,
about messaging
mm.
and stuff like that. And
Yeah, because
e
I hired Adam Jablin as a coach recently, and
okay,
he's been just phenomenally awesome for my
yeah,
growth. Yeah,
yeah, and then
pulling off the rest of those masks that I don't even know that I have.
yeah, yeah, it's tough that way. And um that the mask thing, that's a huge thing. And really, we're kind of all talking about the same thing with different words, and just trying to touch on a bunch of them so that people go, oh yeah, I do that, because they know
Yeah,
they have a mask
yeah,
on. Or
yeah.
but like when you walk around open, there was a just a podcast clip I saw, and it was Grant Cardone and Brad Lee, I think. So two, like, mega real estate guys. They've done a ton of selling stuff, and they're just hashing out back and forth. And or no, it was shoot, Lions Not Sheep guy, Sean Whalen, and Sean Whalen and Brad Lee were the two. And Brad Lee says, like, he's always been afraid of snakes for whatever reason, right? Like, somebody told him he was afraid of snakes when he was a kid. He was afraid of snakes. Like, that was created. So he gets to be an adult, like he's in his 20s, and he knows a snake guy, and he calls up snake guy. He's like, I want a snake, bring him over. Like, he didn't know what hit him, but it just like it was in his chest, and he was like, "I need
Time.
to have
It's
a snake."
time.
Yeah.
Right.
So the guy brings over a snake, drops off a snake, and it's like a python, right? Like not a small snake, but a big one. And he drops him off, and this thing's like slithering on him, and he's like starts to freak out a little bit. And then he says he has this like cartoon-like experience with this snake where like the snake's like looking him right in the face.
Has
And
them
he gets
hypnotized, right?
Yeah, and he gets to look at him and he goes, "Why the fuck am I afraid of you?" Like
Right.
he looks at the snake and he goes, "I don't know why I'm afraid of you."
Right. Right.
And so then he's like going even deeper. He's like, "I'm afraid of bungee jumping. I'm afraid of jumping out of plane." Like all of these things that you were afraid of that we've never experienced. "Oh, I
Right.
could never do that. I could never go do that," because we have this
They
developed belief.
become your walls, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and so, like, and I know this is why, looking at and, I got this typed out, your introduction, I'm looking at all of these different things, and I'm just like, the reason you're able to do that is because you feel, and forgive me if I'm assuming, but I think this is where this is coming from. You felt like you've dealt with the worst of what you could be. And now you get to go, well, if it doesn't work out, it's not as bad as that.
Right.
It's not as bad
Absolutely.
as the
Right.
past.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that, we look down as a society, we look down on people with addiction issues and sobriety issues, and really like the people that come out of it, we need to build those people up because they're the people doing all the shit.
Well, and allow them to shine their light because I mean the prisons are full of people that we fail to connect with, and people, when you start doing the fentanyl thing, 106,000 freaking people dying a year from overdoses. It's a failure to connect.
Yeah. Yeah,
It just
that's
makes me
that's the
really sad. It breaks my heart.
yeah, it's tough. And I worked in a mental hospital for a year, and I signed up to work in the geriatric unit because I liked to help old people because all they're doing is coming in to getting their meds straight and going back out. Like you see them, you're going to see them a few times. You get to know the patients because they come back after they don't take their medication right. And being a male in that industry, there's not a whole lot of male influence there with nurses, and techs are all usually females. And so I ended up getting pulled a lot to the adult unit, and the adult unit is people coming in gone, basically, like they can't connect with them at the prison, and they can't put them in the prison because they feel they're in danger, so they bring
Right.
them to
Sure.
the mental hospital to get dry out, basically. And that was one of the most difficult parts for me, was like, there's, like you mentioned, there's no coping strategies in those places. It's not about coping strategies. It's like, how do we dry you out? And then, okay, see you later. Like, there's
Oh,
no,
right, absolutely. And then how can you not do but what you did before? Because that's what, and like whenever you release a guy from prison or wherever, how can if you haven't equipped him, how can you expect him not to do the same thing he did?
yeah, there's no development of that aspect in trying to help, and that's why, like, I keep saying you're an inspiration, is because you are doing those things. You're like,
Right. I didn't send you the song. I wrote this because I've done a lot of overdose awareness events, and one of them, my friend Michelle had lost her son, and we were at the event, and she made the statement, Michael might be passed, but he still has a voice. And so I had wrote the voice, and it come out okay. And it talks about that being the voice for the voiceless, and that the system is breaking people, and it's still, it doesn't really it's not set up to serve them, to heal them. It's set up to just break them a little more. And I think it's a really sad affairs, but I think we have the power, like guys like you, guys like me, stepping up and shining the light, that we can actually leave the world a better place than it was when we got here. And
and just
we need to for our kids.
yeah, just promoting the message that, like, the addiction piece, it is just one piece, right? Like, it's not the whole freaking puzzle.
Right.
And that's the biggest thing for me that it took me a long time to recognize. Like, I'm just the guy who goes out Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Like, that's who I am.
Right.
No, it's
That's who I am, but it's
like,
not.
it's what you've done. It's not
Yeah.
it's not what
Yeah.
who you are.
Yeah.
And all of those things that happened because of the addiction aspect of it, like all of those things that happened, it doesn't have to define your entire life. And
Right.
oftentimes, like you said, when we get stuck in the prison system or in the that system, it can define a large portion
Right,
of your
right, and
life.
I mean, because I've seen people, once they get a diagnosis, they spiral then, and they get worse because it's like, "Oh, no, I knew I was defective." You
Yeah,
know?
and we're seeing it a lot now, especially with this age of information aspect of TikTok and YouTube Shorts and all of the short content. People are making the content around ADHD, around autism, around the spectrum, and that's not an addiction piece, but spiraling into the spectrum piece. I've seen it twice with people that I know that get diagnosed with being on the spectrum at 30, 40, 50, and like they blow up like
Right.
for weeks
It's
at a
strange,
time.
right? Because and that's what I said to one person. I was like, "What is the difference between you and last week that you weren't diagnosed?" You know, it's a strange phenomenon, right? That it happens like that.
Yeah, and it was, the tough part is whether it's a known block or something that they're just like, not, it's not real and push it aside, or just they don't even know it's there. And then somebody telling them something, this could be the most independent person. Like, I don't give a crap what anybody else says. I do what I do. And then they give them a diagnosis and they just completely crumble into something that's not that.
Right,
And
right into hell, right? Dying of diagnosis, yeah,
yeah, and that's, we see it pretty often, and like you said that, obviously we're now talking about a broken system, at multiple levels. The one that I struggle with the most is those diagnoses. Like, let's get them. The diagnosis is fine, but fixing it with the medication only is wrong.
right.
And even if we do give a diagnosis, we have to find a way to allow that a child, in most cases, they're now being diagnosed between 4 and 7 for the autism, the spectrum.
Yeah, 3 is a typical age, right?
Yeah, so being able to, with that, like, empower the parents to allow the life or the world to form around that child instead of
Right, and
making
let
the
them learn
child.
at their learning at whatever their learning tendency is to embrace that instead of forcing them into a system that doesn't serve them anyhow.
Yeah, and there's I would argue that a lot of addiction issues come from the lack of support for certain things that are there, right? Like, the being on a spectrum is
Well,
not
if
that
you
uncommon.
Yeah, and if you go that route where if you go society and the manufacturing society, they just want us to be a cog in the wheel. We're all of it, we're not all meant to just be a cog in the wheel. The artistic expression gets wiped out that way, and it just wipes out so many other things of the creative creations that we're meant to be. If we're like God and God is a creator, I would put out that that we're meant to be creative and we're supposed to be creating all the time, and that if we just go to school and memorize stuff, that then takes the ability or the notion that we're meant to be creators away.
Yeah, I have those conversations with, with employees for quite a while now, being in management positions and stuff like that. Like, you often get the question, what do I do now? And they're not creating their environment. They're just like, what do I do? Like, tell me what to do. And so that's a struggle that I've had in those ability to lead positions, is like, how do we get you to recognize that, like, you're defining your entire position. I'm not defining it for you. Like, I've got some stuff I need you to get done, and that's within the frame of reference of that. But, like, I need you to, like, be initiative and, like, figure out the next step for yourself and build that. And I'm sure that, with the system that's designed that way, that's just how it comes out. Like, you get
Right.
out of it, and
Well,
that's what you
well, and
want.
a lot of times, they were blessed to have you then, because a lot of times in the management, they just want you to do your job and no growth, no growth, no growth, because then it leaves another spot in the wheel that's not being taken care of. So I think that a good leader always wants the people to replace them. And that was one of the things I learned in the recovery rooms too. Is my first sponsor always taught me that especially in service positions, is that once the time you finally figured out how to do this well, you're supposed to move out of the way and let somebody else have the opportunity to learn the lessons that they're supposed to learn from doing a job like that.
Yeah, it's quite a growth factor on both sides of the equation if it's done properly, right? Like, the
Yeah,
leading and the following.
absolutely. Right, right. It
Um,
really it really makes you a leader that people want to follow then, if you give
yeah.
them opportunity and ways to grow.
Yeah. So what's next for Greater Ways? Like, I know that you mentioned that you want to do it at scale. So how are we getting to scale? How can people?
I'm not exactly sure how all that. That's why I brought in another coach. I've been doing a lot of work through Transformation Academy. They're the online where they have a course for everything, and so I've been working with Kimberly Rich on some of that stuff too to figure all that out. But I'm working my way through it, and of course this would be one of them, getting over my fears, because in the olden days, I would have never done this. I would have never talked. Whenever you hear in the recovery rooms, a lot of the old timers would tell the newcomers to sit down and shut up. You don't have anything to say, and that wasn't like that for me, because if I wasn't drinking or drugging, I wasn't talking. And so my sponsor would have said, "You need to say something at every meeting," because I was just so without an intoxicant in me, I could not talk in front of people. So finding my voice, that's become a big thing for me. Connections. I was supposed to meet with a guy doing a men's retreat, and I want to be able to do retreats for a lot of it. I want it to be men's work, whether it be with younger people and or older people, because I think there's a great need in society for us older guys, that that we don't just tap out and end up sitting watching TV, like so many do for our waning years, where older people would become actually elders and connect with younger people. So I would like to be a vessel of that. But with all that being said, I'm not exactly sure what that scale will look like. I have a notion. I wrote a framework for a bunch of different breaking your goddamn books. And so I hope to release those here pretty soon. One of them, the first one will be the Dam of Denial, and I kind of wrote it on like the Moses story, because if you go the Moses story, he was, a slave, and then went into the river, and then was a prince, and he didn't know he was a slave. And kind of like an alcoholic or an addict, you come along and tell me I'm an addict, I'll be like, no, 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 because I envisioned Moses, somebody, whenever he was Prince of Egypt, them coming along and telling him he was actually a slave. He'd be like, no way, I'm not a slave. And
Well,
then
and arguably, it's not even just the addiction piece. There's a large majority of the population right now are slaves without even recognizing it. And
Richard Rohr is one of my favorite Franciscans. He would say we're all a slave to our broke thinking, because we have repetitive thoughts over and over again. I would think that too.
yeah, and just the financial aspect of it, and the education piece, and
Because insanity rears its ugly head, and so whether it be in relationships, whether it be doing the wrong thing, pornography, and then can't figure out why we can't connect to our significant other, whether it be overspending, underspending, financial fears. Yeah, I think there's insanity. Insanity runs the roost of our whole society, of buying one more thing, possessed by our possessions, of I'm going to buy one more thing, or do, kind of like the cow on the fence scenario. Always, why would a cow with a field of grass be putting his head on outside of the fence to get the grass on the outside? It doesn't make any sense. But that's what I equate humanity a lot of times, is we can't be happy where we're at. But to go back to the Moses story, and then he runs, and I can imagine him. It's like my 20 years on the roof. I'm free. I don't need people. I don't need people. My desert times where, and then imagine him being out there. I got my little flock. I got my wife, and okay, now I'm just supposed to be a shepherd, right? I'm just supposed to be a roofer, and then God coming along and saying, "Oh no, Prince of Egypt. Oh no, slave guy. You got to go back and you got to set a bazillion people free." And that's what I think, that if we really get the gift of connecting with our creator, and you've overcome some stuff, the gift that you get is to be able to go back and set people that struggle with those same struggles free.
Yeah, and it allows, being connected to the creator aspect, it allows us to create connections considerably easier with other
Oh,
people, right? Like that's
absolutely. If they're connected, they want to connect with you. And the lights, it's not, because I've been trying to write this thing on competing or completing, and I want to be a completer. I don't want to be a competer. I want to make you better, no matter if our lives come in contact. I want you to feel better for the coming together, because I always feel better for the coming together. So I want to add that L to any competition and have it be completion.
Yeah,
So
for sure. And that's that, that cooperation over or collaboration over competition. And
yeah, yeah,
it's really interesting because, I've with the podcast and with just, how I've set myself up on real estate side, I've been able to be in some rooms that with some pretty highly successful people that have, moved the needle in real estate. And every single one of them says, I don't care what you do in your business because there's enough for all of us.
right, right.
And
Abundance isn't yeah. Abundance
it's
is a
not
dance
me versus
we
you,
can
it's
all
me
join
and you.
in. Yeah,
Yeah, and I always go back to the story of, when personal computers were coming in, and Macintosh was kinda leading the way with the messaging piece of like, let's try to get a computer in every single household, and, IBM latched onto that idea and said, "Yep, we should have a computer in every household," and the IBM and Mac, obviously Apple now, led the way in personal computer for so long, right?
yeah.
And it was because they both had the same messaging, and so people were like, oh, it doesn't really matter which one I buy, it's a personal computer, and they led the way. Where Dell was trying to be more like, well, we're better than that guy, we have a better computer. And everybody's like, okay, cool, but these people are saying the same thing, and they're just that messaging's easier to push when you're just following the wake of somebody else that's pushing the same message, and you're going to get your message out there to more people. And so,
Right,
I
and because a lot of people would say the life coaching industry is way overpopulated, and it may or may not be. But if you're like I started out with, if you know your I, then your why will manifest and it'll bring the people you're meant to serve.
Well, it would maybe I think overpopulation is a simplification, right? Like saying it's overpopulated is the easy way to go, oh yeah, there's too many people doing it, right? Like I can't get into that because there's too many people doing it. And what you and I know you recognize this, and what I've recognized it as well. We've all lived different lives, which puts us in different places and has
Right,
different
it gives us
perspectives on every single
yeah,
issue, which allows us to give a different perspective. So you may have done the life coaching thing with one person. You may have done the business coaching thing with one person, and you kind of tapped and they didn't connect with you, or you weren't able to, really listen to their experience and learn from it. But
right.
there's somebody
Wrong
else out there.
person at the wrong time or right person at the wrong time. Sure, sure. And
Yeah. So
like they say, whenever the student's ready, the teacher will appear. And I found that to be very true. Whenever I'm really ready
absolutely.
to learn the lesson, the right teacher comes along.
Yeah, so that would be what I would leave people with from that life coaching perspective is just, even if you've tried it before, there's somebody out there that has an experience that you're going to connect with. And when you find that person, when you're open to finding that person, you're going to be
Oh, what a
scrolling
difference!
on.
What a difference it makes, right? What a
Yeah,
difference it makes. Yeah.
yeah, it's quite a difference, that like I've read books, listened to audible books, read books, you mentioned self-help. I'm just like you. I think I have 325 books in my Audible library. Like
Right.
that's what we do. And some of those messages were just like, yeah, okay. And then
Yeah.
others
And
you like,
some of it is just regurgitated. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. Well,
So
and then other times, it could be regurgitated, but you hear it again and you go, it
that's
sends
what
you
I
off.
needed
And
to hear today,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
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 So,
Yeah.
so yeah, I think, just that being open to the experience of life as a whole and not closing yourself off is such a big thing, and just being able to be
Right,
open.
right, because and then the ego always ends up being a blocker too, because I mean, because I've had that be, spiritual arrogance is what I what I began to call it, because once we think, we climb up Mount Know It All and we think that we know it all, it keeps us from, it becomes like the dark cloud over the mountain because it blocks any new information from coming in.
Yeah,
And
it's
so
like the more the more you don't know kind of
yeah,
thing.
absolutely. Yeah, and if you can sit with that and be all right with that, a lot of people, I think struggle with that one of saying I don't know and just being let the answers come.
For sure. Well, Greg, I appreciate your time today. I think we've got a lot of stuff that came out that was awesome, and I didn't expect anything less with all the things you do and all the things I do. I knew we'd be able to come up with.
No, it was awesome.
Yeah,
I'm really glad that we got connected.
yeah, for sure. And I was glad we were able to get your message out. And yeah, I hope whoever's listening, I hope you got something out of it. And I'd encourage you to reach out and touch base with either me or Greg on something that you pulled out of this. And I appreciate everybody listening. And Greg, if you could leave people with one thing, what would you leave them with?
Get to know your I, and then you'll know your why. That
Perfect.
would be good.
There's your title of the YouTube video. I like it.
There
So,
we go.
all right.
Appreciate you, brother. Have a
I
great day.
appreciate it, Greg, and everybody else. We'll see you on the next one.